Rapid weight loss. When you're trying to lose weight, you want it to happen fast. You're looking for the number on the scale to drop quickly, for your clothes to fit better, and the compliments to start rolling in. So why do so many people who lose weight fast end up heavier, fatter, and more frustrated a few months later? When weight comes off very quickly, a disproportionate amount of what you lose isn't fat, it's muscle. Your body doesn't know you're dieting for aesthetics. It just knows energy is scarce, so it starts shedding tissue that burns the most calories at rest. Muscle is expensive to maintain, so it's one of the first things to go when calories drop hard. That's a real problem because muscle is what keeps your metabolism running, and less muscle means fewer calories burned at rest. So once the diet ends, or you start eating like a normal human again, you're returning to food with a slower metabolism than the one you started with. Same habits, lower burn rate. Fat comes back faster and easier than before. That's why rapid weight loss so often leads to rebound weight gain, frustration, and the feeling that your body is working against you. What works better is boring but effective. Slower fat loss, consuming enough protein to protect muscle, and some form of resistance training so your body has a reason to keep that muscle around. You don't need to lose weight overnight. You need a body that still knows how to burn fuel when the diet is done. Sweating equals fat loss. You were taught that sweat is proof something is working. More layers, more heat, more misery equals more fat burned. But if sweat actually meant fat loss, saunas would be the most effective weight loss tool on earth. Sweat is not fat leaving your body. It's just water. When you sweat, you're cooling yourself down, not burning stored energy. That's why people can lose several pounds after a brutal workout or a sauna session and gain it all back by the next morning. Nothing meaningful changed. You didn't lose fat, you just lost fluid. Being hot feels hard, so it feels productive. But fat loss doesn't care how uncomfortable you are. It cares how much energy your body actually uses. In reality, your body burns more calories when it has to keep itself warm than when it's trying to cool itself down. When you're cold, your metabolism ramps up to maintain core temperature. Brown fat activates. Muscles subtly contract. Energy gets spent just to keep you functional. That process burns calories without sweat ever being involved. When you overheat, your body shifts into damage control. Blood flow is redirected toward cooling, performance drops, and output is capped. You feel wrecked, but not because you're burning more fat. You're just dealing with heat stress. Instead of wrapping yourself in a plastic-lined sauna suit and sweating all over the floor, a better approach is moderate training, movement you can repeat without needing days to recover, and environments that don't rely on artificial suffering just to feel effective. Fat loss comes from energy use over time, not how soaked your shirt is at the end. Carbohydrates are bad. At some point, carbs became the villain of every diet conversation. Bread, rice, pasta, fruit, all tossed into the same avoid at all costs bucket. If that's true, why do the leanest, most active populations on Earth eat carbs every day? Carbohydrates aren't inherently fattening, they're just fuel. When you eat carbs, they break down into glucose, which your body prefers to use for energy, especially during movement and exercise. If that glucose gets used, it doesn't get stored as fat, it gets burned. Storage only happens when intake repeatedly exceeds what your body needs. Where carbs got their reputation is in how they're commonly consumed. Ultra-processed carbs digest quickly, spike blood sugar, then crash it. That cycle drives hunger, cravings, and overeating. Whole food carbohydrates behave very differently. Fruits, veggies, potatoes, rice, and oats all come packaged with fiber, water, and nutrients that slow digestion and help regulate blood sugar. That's why physically active cultures and endurance athletes thrive on carb-heavy diets without becoming overweight. They're using the fuel they eat. The body doesn't panic and store it. Carbs also support thyroid function, training performance, and recovery. When carbs drop too low for too long, energy falls, workouts suffer, and stress hormones rise, none of which help fat loss. It's okay to eat carbs, just choose ones that actually serve a purpose instead of sugar-filled calories with little nutritional value. Carbs don't ruin fat loss, misusing them does. More equals better. Every January, people decide this is the year they go all in. 6 days a week, sometimes 7, no excuses. And somehow, by February, the gym is empty again. The failure here isn't laziness, it's overload. When people change too many things at once, the brain pushes back. New workouts, strict dieting, earlier mornings, and no rest days. Each change demands attention and energy. Stack too many together, and the brain simply rebels. This is why all-or-nothing plans feel motivating at first and exhausting shortly after. Your body can recover from hard training, but your brain resists change, especially when it's drastic. As soon as it sees an opportunity to go back to how things were, your motivation is gone. That's why people who go hard often end up doing nothing at all. Consistency doesn't come from intensity. It comes from small habits that don't require constant willpower. Small changes compound. Big changes trigger resistance. There's also the law of diminishing returns. Past a certain point, more work doesn't produce more benefit. It just produces fatigue. People who change their bodies long-term aren't training the most days in a row. They're training in a way that still works when motivation dips, schedules change, and life interferes. Spot reduction. Everyone has a body part they'd like to erase. The fat on their belly, their thighs, and the back of their arms. The logic feels obvious. Work the area you want to shrink. Except that's not how fat loss actually works. Fat loss doesn't happen locally. It happens systemically. When your body decides to release stored fat, it pulls it from everywhere according to genetics, hormones, and sex-specific patterns. No exercise can override that order. Crunches strengthen abdominal muscles. They don't pull fat off your stomach. Tricep exercises build muscle in your arms, but arm fat only shrinks when overall body fat drops. You can change shape under the fat, but you can't choose where fat disappears first. That's why people can have strong abs and still not see them. The muscle is there, the fat layer just hasn't budged. Despite being told this again and again, people seem to stick with targeted exercises. Maybe it's because the burn they experience feels like progress. But fat cells don't respond to local discomfort, they respond to total energy expenditure. That doesn't mean strength training is pointless. Building muscle improves insulin sensitivity, increases resting metabolism, and changes how your body looks once fat does come off. The key is to focus on total fat loss while strengthening everything underneath. Once that happens, the area you're fixated on starts changing too. Walking is worthless. It doesn't feel intense. It doesn't leave you gasping on the floor. So walking gets dismissed as not real exercise, even though it quietly solves one of the biggest fat loss problems most people don't realize they have. Walking works because it lowers cortisol in a way intense exercise often doesn't. Cortisol is a stress hormone. When it stays elevated, the body becomes more defensive. Fat loss slows, appetite increases, sleep quality drops, and cravings get stronger. That's not a motivation issue, it's a hormonal one. Abdominal fat tissue is especially sensitive to cortisol, which is why chronic stress tends to show up around the midsection. When cortisol stays high, the body is more likely to hold on to fat in that area, making those last few pounds feel impossible to lose, even when calories are controlled. Hard cardio raises cortisol by design. That isn't automatically bad. The problem is when it's layered on top of poor sleep, calorie restriction, work stress, and the pressure to do more. In that state, cortisol never really comes down. Walking does the opposite. It tells the nervous system things are safe enough to relax. Cortisol drops. Recovery improves, and the body becomes more willing to release excess fat. There's also the movement piece people underestimate. Walking increases non-exercise activity, meaning all the movement you do outside the gym. It doesn't feel like exercise, but it adds up across the day. This is why step counts matter. Not because 10,000 is magical, but because regular, low-stress movement keeps cortisol lower and energy use higher all day long. Eating at night. Have you ever felt guilty grabbing a late-night snack? As if your body flips a switch after dark and stores everything as fat. But your metabolism doesn't own a clock, and it definitely doesn't know what time it is. Your body doesn't suddenly change rules at night. Calories don't become more fattening because the sun went down. What matters is how much you eat across the day and how your hormones respond overall. This myth came from correlation, not cause. People who eat late often eat more total calories. Late-night eating also tends to involve more junk food, mindless snacking, and poor sleep. Those factors drive weight gain, not the hour on the clock. For some people, avoiding food at night actually backfires. Skipping dinner often leads to overeating the next day or setting off binge-restrict cycles that make weight loss harder to sustain. Sleep also plays a bigger role than most people realize. Poor sleep increases hunger and makes it harder to regulate blood sugar the next day. That alone can stall fat loss, regardless of what time your last meal happened. What works best is structuring meals in a way that fits your schedule, supports sleep, and keeps total calorie intake in check. When eating lines up with your life instead of fighting it, timing stops being the issue. Long cardio. For decades, weight loss advice was simple. Just do more cardio. Longer sessions, slower pace, burn all those calories off. So why do some lifelong cardio devotees struggle to look the way they hoped? Steady cardio burns calories, but the body adapts quickly. Over time, it becomes more efficient, meaning you burn fewer calories doing the same work. The treadmill session that felt brutal at first eventually becomes maintenance. Excessive cardio also encourages muscle loss if not paired with strength training and adequate food. Less muscle means a lower resting burn, which undermines fat loss long term. There's also a ceiling. You can only add so much time before fatigue and absolute boredom take over. Most people don't quit because cardio doesn't work. They quit because they can't stand doing it anymore. Shorter bouts of high-intensity interval training, or HIIT workouts, challenge the system differently. They preserve muscle better, improve resting metabolism for hours after they're done, and take less time. Combined with strength training, HIIT workouts change body composition much more effectively than endless steady-state sessions. Cardio isn't useless, it's just incomplete on its own. The fix isn't more time, it's varied intensity and duration, and no more treating the treadmill like a full-time job. You lack discipline. You've probably heard it more than once. If you were just more disciplined, this would finally work. But you follow the rules. You track your macros, you don't skip workouts, and you avoid junk food and alcohol at all costs. Yet the scale barely moves, or it moves a little and then snaps right back. What's failing isn't your effort, it's the conditions your body is operating under. When you're chronically stressed, don't get enough sleep, or spend most of your day running on empty, your body stops responding to fat loss the way you expect it to. Chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated, and cortisol makes it harder to lose fat, especially around the midsection. At the same time, poor sleep disrupts the hormones that control hunger and blood sugar, increasing cravings while reducing insulin sensitivity. That combination pushes the body toward storing energy instead of using it, even when your diet is healthy and your workouts are consistent. This is why people under long-term stress gain weight without eating more, and why people who sleep poorly struggle to lose fat no matter how strict they are. Discipline doesn't override biology, it just asks you to fight it harder. Fat loss becomes more realistic when the constant stress load comes down. That means prioritizing sleep so hormones can stabilize, reducing all-out intensity when your body is already worn down, and allowing yourself recovery days instead of pushing harder every time progress slows. When stress hormones drop and sleep improves, the body becomes more willing to let fat go. Fat is bad. Low-fat labels used to be everywhere for a reason. We were told fat clogs arteries, slows weight loss, and should be avoided whenever possible. Then, obesity rates skyrocketed anyway. Dietary fat doesn't automatically make you fat, and the reason is simple. It's calorie-dense, but it doesn't affect insulin like carbohydrates do. Insulin is the hormone that tells your body to store energy. Carbs and sugar raise insulin quickly because they raise blood glucose. Pure fats don't do that. That's why people can eat a meal built around eggs, avocado, olive oil, salmon, or full-fat dairy and not get the same blood sugar spike they'd get from cereal, juice, snack foods, low-fat desserts, or even skim milk. The low-fat era didn't just remove fat, it replaced it. Food companies pulled fat out, then put sugar and refined starch back in, so it would still taste good. That's how you end up with healthy products that are basically sweetened carbs with a health label. You're hungry again an hour later, you snack more, insulin stays elevated, and fat loss gets harder because you think you're eating light. On top of that, traditional fats like butter, cream, and lard got swapped for industrial seed oils in a lot of packaged foods. Those oils are heavily processed and show up everywhere because they're cheap and shelf-stable, not because they're a metabolic upgrade. This isn't a license to drink heavy cream like it's water. Calories still exist. But if you're choosing between a fat that keeps blood sugar stable and a low-fat product padded with sugar, the low-fat option often causes more trouble. The practical move is simple. Keep fats in your diet, choose the real ones, and eat them in moderation, just like everything else. Snacking boosts metabolism. You may have heard your metabolism works like a furnace. Keep feeding it all day, keep the fire burning. That idea sounds reasonable, until you look at what constant eating actually does inside your body. Every time you eat, insulin rises to handle incoming fuel. If you're snacking from morning to night, insulin never really gets a break, and fat burning doesn't happen because your body is busy storing and managing what keeps coming in. Grazing seems harmless, but when you're constantly topping off the tank, your body has no reason to use what's stored. Intermittent fasting, or time-restricted eating, changes that pattern by creating longer gaps where insulin can fall, and your body can switch from processing food to using stored fuel. It also tends to reduce overall calories without obsessive tracking, because fewer eating windows means fewer total opportunities to overeat. That's one reason studies often find better fat loss results with fasting compared to daily calorie cutting. Plus, many people stick with it more easily. The practical solution isn't never snack. It's having an eating window that's easy for you to maintain, eating meals full of protein, fiber, and fats that are actually satiating, and letting your body experience clear stretches of no incoming food so your insulin can go down. Snacking made sense when food was scarce and physical labor constant, but in modern times, fat loss is easier when eating has a clear beginning and end. Broken metabolism. At some point, weight loss stops working the way it used to. You eat less, move more, and nothing happens. That's when people assume that their metabolism is broken. But in reality, it's not damaged, it just adapted. The body is designed to adapt to almost everything we do to it, including prolonged calorie restriction, chronic stress, and lack of recovery. Resting metabolism drops, hunger signals increase, and energy expenditure goes down. That adaptation is protective. The body conserves energy when it senses food might be scarce. This is why people can follow the same plan that once worked and suddenly see no progress. The inputs didn't change, but the body's response did. The mistake is trying to fight adaptation by pushing harder, more restriction, more cardio, and even less food. That only reinforces the slowdown and makes the body more defensive. Adaptation can reverse, but only when the signals change. Muscle has to be rebuilt, so the body has a reason to burn energy again. Food intake has to be sufficient enough that scarcity doesn't feel permanent, and recovery has to improve so stress hormones can come down. A broken metabolism is usually just an overprotected one. Fixing it isn't about forcing more. It's about removing the conditions that taught the body to slow down in the first place. Supplements work. Fat burners, detox teas, metabolism boosters. There's always a product promising to do the hard part for you. But if supplements work the way they're advertised, weight loss wouldn't be this common of a struggle. Most supplements aren't completely useless, but their effects are fairly small. They might slightly increase energy expenditure, dull appetite for a short time, or help you lose a bit of water weight so you think they're actually working. But none of them override basic biology. They can't fix poor food choices, inconsistent training, or a diet built around hunger and restriction. The appeal is understandable. It's a lot easier to add a pill than to question what you actually might be doing. Supplements offer the hope that effort can be outsourced, that the system can be bypassed. The truth is, fat loss is less about some magical pill and more about what you put in your mouth and how you use your body. Like choosing healthy foods that don't spike your blood sugar and drive hunger, eating enough protein to protect muscle, and putting down the fork when you're full. Training matters too, because it helps you keep muscle, and muscle keeps your metabolism higher at rest. Supplements can amplify a good foundation, but they can't replace it. When food quality is poor and training is inconsistent, no capsule is strong enough to override the signal your body is getting. Calorie deficit. This one sounds scientific, clean, and logical. Eat less than you burn, and the rest should sort itself out. Except human bodies don't run like spreadsheets. Calories matter, but they don't act in isolation. Two people can eat the same number of calories and get very different results because hormones, sleep, stress, muscle mass, and a variety of other factors influence whether those calories get used, stored, or conserved. Calories are just the input. The body decides the outcome. This is where a lot of people go wrong. Fat loss slows, so they assume the fix is to increase exercise or eat even less. Drop to 1,200 calories, then 1,000, sometimes less than 800. On paper, that looks like discipline. Inside the body, it signals a threat. When calories fall that low, the body adapts to survive. Energy expenditure drops, often without you noticing, and training output declines. Hunger signals ramp up, and muscle tissue starts breaking down. Instead of burning more fat, the body becomes more efficient at surviving on less. That's why extreme deficits almost always lead to plateaus, binges, or rapid regain. The math didn't fail. The body adjusted. Fat loss happens when the deficit is small enough that the body doesn't panic. When protein intake is high enough to protect muscle, training tells the body to burn energy, and sleep and stress aren't telling your system to conserve all it has. Calories still count, but if you want to lose weight, the goal isn't to eat as little as possible. It's to create a sustainable deficit in a body that still feels safe enough to let fat go. Most weight loss problems don't come from doing nothing. They come from doing the wrong things really well. When you stop chasing myths and start working with how the body actually responds, fat loss stops feeling like a fight and starts behaving more predictably.